The Legend of Dragoon lives on in that sort of cult classic hit where people look back fondly, or at least the people I've talked to. Or at least my childhood brain remembering does. Let me tell you, little me only got to disc 2 and there's 4. This game has been on my backlog for a long time, and I wanted to challenge my childhood nostalgia and finally give this game its time and see it to the end. It's sort of an enigma. It has strong sales, unique battle system, and yet there is no sequel to be. Is it worth your time? The answer is a little bit more complicated than a simple yes or no. I'll have to dive in quite a bit deeper to unveil this almost king of PS1 RPGs. Oh, heavy is the judgment for single installment RPGs in the land of nostalgia. So let's boot up our PS1 and revive this cult classic. Before we talk about the stats, a special shout out to Missildine Online. I reached out to them for a specific reason. I wanted to use their footage for Legend of Dragoon because I played this on original hardware, and the email exchanges we had were very pleasant, and they allowed me to use their footage. Going through Corey's YouTube page, I've seen walkthroughs of Final Fantasy IX, Persona 3 Reload, obviously Legend of Dragoon. They have a lot of content, they have some guide stuff, so definitely check them out, and a huge thank you for letting me use your footage. Links to all their content will be down below as well. Thank you again. My save file for Legend of Dragoon says 47 hours, 17 minutes, and 53 seconds, not counting deaths and, of course, the end game. Because a lot of the RPGs at this time, well, you don't get that completed save file, unfortunately. Dart was my highest level at level 40. My lowest level was level 33. My final party levels were 40, 37, and 38. I unlocked all of Dart's additions. I didn't master the final one, though, and we'll talk about that system in a little bit. I collected all 50 Stardust. I used a guide after 10-ish hours for 2 specific reasons, and one later that cropped up. And more on that later. I took one of my copies off my shelf, and I played it on my PS2, original hardware. And originally, this game launched in Japan at the end of 1999, and we got it here in the States in the summer of 2000. Why I say this is kind of an enigma of a game, it sold decently well in Japan, but it sold really well in North America, especially in that time frame. Almost 1 million units in 2000. For a game that doesn't have Final Fantasy in the title, that's pretty darn amazing. From the bit of research I did, it also seems like the budget was very high for the time, but who cares when you're getting those kind of sales? For instance, another PS1 RPG which had another unique twist on a battle system, Legend of Legaia, sold under 1 million copies, and we still got a sequel on the PS2. I don't know why this became a one installment IP. I did see rumors that there was a planned sequel, and it got canned for some reason. But all I've got in this revive is this game itself. And before I push childhood Michael out of the way, I wondered where my kid-like fondness came from. Teenage me really liked this game. I think the clear answer is Dragon Ball Z. There's a moment in this game fairly early on where you first transform into a Dragoon. It's a power-up scene, screaming, cool visuals. I know young me was losing his mind. I still love when games do this kind of stuff. I'm looking at you, Breath of Fire 4, that power-up goodness. Oh yes. Besides the Dragon Ball Z reference, I know that when I was a kid, I was always drawn to weird battle systems. Whether good or bad, I like the different take. It's probably why I was drawn to Shadow Hearts series on the PS2 eventually, and I have a very fond memory of the impact of the first disc. I've thought about this scene for years and years, and it's the main reason why I've always put it on the list to come back to one day. And I have. So looking on it now after I've rolled credits on the game, do I have that same yearning? Will I still have that same memory surfacing to make me want to open up the case and do it all over again? No. But what I can tell you is the ending of Disc 3 will forever live in my mind. Also, the end of Disc 2 has a wholesome quality that I absolutely will think of. Or a particular rooftop scene in Disc 1. A little bro time with Lavitz and Dart. I have these snapshots of moments that I will, hopefully, if my mind will let me, forever recall with a sort of new nostalgia. So thank you, Dart and Company, and with that, let's move over childhood, and let's talk the present. Getting into the mindset of playing an older game, when I go into an RPG, battle system isn't my first thought. It might be a backwards way of thinking since this is a video game, but story and characters have more weight in the coin purse than battle. Though RPGs usually have a healthy time sink, and if the battle mode is tedious or boring, it can start to become an uphill battle. What you will find right away when playing The Legend of Dragoon, battles are slow. There's no getting around it on original hardware. That get in and out of battle is not existent in Legend of Dragoon. When a random encounter is initiated, the screen does this weird vertical blur motion, and then once the battle stage loads after a few camera angle shifts, we're talking a good 15 seconds before you get control. Like I said, on original hardware, there's no way around the slowness of it. Not to mention that enemies also sometimes take quite a bit of time running up to you or casting their spells or using abilities. Young me only made it to disc 2. I'm wondering if this was one of the reasons I put it down. Well, no, I still do this today. I move on to other games all the time. Now, within the battle system, you have the bread and butter of combat in the form of additions. I've never seen a combat system quite like this before or after. The system is built on timed button presses for your normal attacks. If you have poor timing or mispress before you finish off your additions to see the finisher attack while your character poorly screams out the name of their move, this sounds like I'm complaining, but I love the bad voice acting in this game. Burning Rush will forever be stuck in my head. You do only a fraction of the damage if you mess up. So you're incentivized to become familiar with the timing of your attacks, and what makes it fun and sometimes tedious is each character and each additional addition has different timings for the attacks and the amount of inputs you're going to be doing. Throwing another wrench into the system, the enemies can counter you, and that can really throw off your rhythm because you have to press circle instead of your usual attack button. And man, that sometimes it can be rough. Now you can imagine when you have to input 4 to 5 times for later editions, you can see how much time you're going to be sinking into simply attacking your enemies. That's a big downside, but the upside is I like the system overall. Using addition grants me more, and there's also some customization and planning because the additions vary in the amount of SP that is gained for each successive attack and the damage it does, which will come into play when we talk about the other side of battling in the Dragoon forms. Another plus is this makes you pay attention to each and every battle. You have to, or else you're not going to do as much damage, and you're probably not going to make it very far in this game. I found the boss battles in this game to be very challenging overall, and it didn't really slow down at all. I had to use every arsenal in the book to throw at them, which is great. Though it still does not change the fact that this is going to be a major time sink for you. One system I like that they do have is they have a nice health gauge system for the enemies you fight. When you select attack and pick which enemy you're going to pummel, the unit name is displayed at the top of the screen. It has this nice banner with either blue, yellow, or red in the background. This is a snappy indicator on how much health the enemy has, which is always a nice touch. But of course, the standout feature is the Dragoons, the transformations, and here we go. There's no way around it. I love the Dragoons. The concept, the designs, the feeling you get when you transform, which the animations can be set to quick in the settings, so yay for quality of life features there. All of it. I am here to get that childhood rush of powering up and doing some cool things, and you get to do cool things. You have 2 different options when you're battling as a Dragoon. You have the D attacks and then your magic attacks. You also get to level up your Dragoon level to stay in that Dragoon form for longer. Once you drop out of it, you revert back to your normal form to then accrue SP points to then be able to change back once more. So you can start to see the strategy of the additions. If you want to gain SP quicker, you want to pick an addition that does that more versus damage so you can get back into your Dragoon form. Another cool thing about the Dragoon forms, the D attacks do elemental damage corresponding with your Dragoon. Dart does fire damage because his element is fire. He's a red Dragoon. Another form of button pressing does come into play with this rotating light up in the upper corner. We have to press it just as it goes a full rotation around the sphere. The more correct button presses, more attacks you get to do, and then you also get this kind of finisher animation, very similar to your additions. Dragoon magic, on the other hand, is no time button presses. You can cast your spell and watch it unfold. There's a lot of interesting spells, more than mere damage, and I found for differing bosses, you're definitely going to want to use some of these. And when you do start getting that cohesive feeling of, oh, I'm going to use this ability right after this boss does this move, and it starts getting this cohesion, and you start feeling that pride well up. Or it doesn't work, and you go at it again, and you learn from your defeat. There's also this awesome special mode you can enter when your whole party has enough SP to turn into Dragoons at the same time. The background shifts to this psychedelic, colorful environment that you're now floating in. It's so cool. And the color scheme is the palette of whichever character initiated this special. So if you use darts, it's going to be very reds and oranges. If you use rose, it's going to be blacks and purples. I love this simple touch, and it just seems so cool. And the best part about the specials, in my opinion, is that D attacks will do their full power without you having to do time button presses. Love this addition. It's just another incentive to build up your team for certain situations like this. Plus, it just looks so cool. There's no switching out your main character Dart, but I did find that any combination of the other two party members is good. I experimented around, I looked up the best metas, and it came down to I used basically whoever I liked. I landed on Dart and two ladies as my team up at the very end, but also had fun with the other characters. -1, which I didn't really use. I used a lower tier party matchup when I rolled the credits, so have fun with it. Choose the party that works well with you and your strategies, and I guarantee you will find success if you choose to brave the long time sink of battles. I do feel that there is enough variety in battles, and the drip feed in new additions or magic, it was enough for me to stick with it. But with the tedium of battles and the bosses, some really tricky boss fights, which I do enjoy, could be enough for somebody to put this down. I did end up throwing my entire arsenal at these baddies to try to be triumphant, and it didn't always work the first time. That does lead me to one of the reasons I used a guide. Not for battles specifically, but for something battle adjacent. For some reason, the designers had the baffling decision to limit your inventory size to 32. I found myself running out of space in areas or dungeons all the time. I would ditch an item, open a chest, and either get the same exact item or something I didn't need. Now, it could be said, with the limited healing of certain characters and having to wait to get into Dragoon form, you will go through your inventory quicker in the meantime. I used a lot of items in this game, more than usual, but I was still running out of freaking space. So what I used the guide for when I entered a new dungeon area, I would come across a treasure chest and look at the guide to see what was in it. Because after about 10-ish hours of play, I was over the gamble of what could be inside of it. Knowing that equipment is separate, I don't think I needed to do this. It was just better for me from a sanity point of view. I needed to know what was in those boxes, no matter what. I mean, it's an RPG. I need to open up the chests. You put this element of limited inventory and then having to backtrack in certain areas, random encounters, slow load times. You can see where that wonderful little crown of best RPGs on PS1 are. It's starting to have a dent or two, or maybe it's missing an entire piece of its crown. But what does that view look like on top of that castle, looking out over the vast kingdom of the Legend of Dragoon? Environment and art direction are key to making me more invested in the story. The world itself is critical to make me want to spend hours in it, which I should be because RPGs demand time. Exploring should be rewarding, and also there should be sights to see. I can say without a doubt, the pre-rendered backgrounds for this game are absolutely stunning. The lighting, the architecture, and the best part of pre-rendered backgrounds, the random angles that the camera gives you. There's this artistic flair that I absolutely love about that. The designers thinking about the angle you'd see when you first come into the town, what's everything look like in the background, how does this castle look out in the distance. This game has so many creative moments like that. Paired with these cool angles and this vivid scenery, the subject matter of some of these places are really cool. One of my favorites visually and conceptually is Valley of Corrupted Gravity. Cool freaking name, and an awesome concept of these floating, broken apart rocks that you have to navigate by either hopping or moving on rock fragments. There's also these modes of light that you go into and you flip upside down, and then you get to traverse the landscape while you're upside down. Visually awesome, conceptually cool, but there it can be a bit tedious to navigate, even if I'm singing all its praises right now. This area honestly is an overall representation of this game as a whole. Remarkable, with some blemishes that some people will just not be able to clear up. Another highlight is the Capital Bale. Beautiful architecture, and it has that different feel from most RPG towns. It's definitely medieval Europe style, but I don't know, there's something about it that just calls to me. I don't know what it is. We've got some seaside vibes and flats. The Black Castle of Kazaz is awesome. The initial shot you get when you're going to there is just, everything is dark and gloomy, and the towers up, or the castle's up in the distance. And there's like green lights. Oh, it's absolutely beautiful. What I think makes this game interesting is the beginning areas are very dark and bland, and almost a little bland, which does make the transition to these areas more welcoming. And going back to those pre-rendered backgrounds, the lighting that they chose to use in most of these scenes, when you see water or anything else, the vibrancy just comes through. It's a spectacle to behold. And thankfully, navigating these various locations is easy. You have this little marker on top of your head, so you can find yourself when the cameras pan out, or you're just not expecting the certain camera angle shift that you go to when you go through the next loading screen. This can be turned on and off too, but then every exit and entrances in towns or dungeons is marked with another little triangle. So you'll always know where you need to go. How you get there is a little different story. You might have to do a little platforming to get there, which is just button presses, but I like this design choice. And overall, I like the design choice of the dungeons themselves, whether it's climbing up the big castle, hopping over lava pits, or climbing a tree trunk bridge. I enjoyed my time in the dungeons. I can't say that for every RPG that I've played. Obviously, there's going to be some that are tedious, and this one has one freaking unbelievably tedious desert maze. Oh my gosh. This is also a time where I looked up a guide, and even with the writer's hard work and layout of a design they tried to sketch, I still got lost. I do think it would taken me longer to get through that maze, regardless, so your service is commended. A final note on guide usage: if you're trying to collect Stardust, which is an optional side quest that will eventually lead to an optional boss, and on the way gives you some items as you work your way to the total of 50 in this game, use a guide. There's no sparkle where the items are, no rhyme or reason minus that they are always in towns, but you would have to check every single thing in the background. Now, that could be awesome. That feeling of stumbling upon something, it does bring joy to me. So sometimes I would do it this way. I would look how many Stardust are in a town, and then I would blindly go and look around because I got that feeling of, oh, I discovered it. And then if I couldn't find one, then I would look it up. That is one way you can do it. I kind of did a hybrid approach, or you could go through it list by list and just get them and collect them so you don't miss any. So we have these beautiful pre-rendered backgrounds, but on the other hand, we have the character models, and they are strange and blocky. Not as blocky as Final Fantasy VII, but a similar vein if you're trying to picture it in your head. There's more distinction, but not much. I have a soft spot for this style of design, so it doesn't totally turn me off, but that's a preference sort of thing. These models aren't going to win any sort of reward. In battle, they use more detailed models, similar to Final Fantasy VII, and again, you get the idea in your head. The intricate designs of the Dragoon forms, though, still stand out so well, especially if you see any promo art or if you have the actual case like I do, the instruction manual. Oh, the color pop and the design, everything is so cool. I think overall the character designs are not over the top, which is kind of rare for a lot of RPGs. For the most part, it really seems like it's just a form over function type of deal. You could point out Rose's design, where one giant boot gauntlet on her leg and one smaller one doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't, but it looks freaking cool. You can also tell where a lot of this budget went to, and that is the extremely vivid cutscenes, even if they have that weird plastic-like feel of early 3D animations from time to time. Even with that little uncanny valley feeling, I still believe they hold up. I wish there was even more of them throughout. The ones we do get are pretty spectacular, though. You'll see some pretty crazy-looking monsters and stuff in these cutscenes, which, talking about the monsters themselves, they're weird and fun. Crazy-looking dragons, tusked beasts, jetpacking pirates, and all the way to a unique final boss fight. Little side note, I'm big on ending bosses. They either have to be really cool design-wise, conceptually unique, or the villain has to be tied to one of the characters from a personal standpoint and be dressed cool. I don't know, be that awesome villain. This ending boss does slide into one of those categories. I won't spoil it for you, don't worry. So these weird blocky PS1 boss designs I think are pretty cool, and beating them up is pretty flashy in Dragoon form. But all that hinges on a story and characters worth your time to see through all the way to the end credits. This assortment of characters are an interesting bunch, with their connections to the overall story, for some, and more pertinent for a few in their relationship with one another. We've got some character tropes displayed here. The wise old man who's a bit like Master Roshi with some of his comments. One of my favorite dynamics, though, is this scene where he's telling a younger party member not to gossip. but he's all about it. Little character moments like this pop up from time to time, but not as often as I would like. Some of this has to do with some off delivery from characters, probably originating from the not the best translation job, but you don't miss total concepts or lost because of it. Even with all this weirdness, the budding relationship between Dart and Lavitz is great. There's a particular rooftop scene when you're in Lavitz's hometown as a standout. You get to meet his mom. It's great. Dart and Shauna being childhood friends and having that budding romance where Dart can't see past her being a little sister to him. And then we have Rose and her cold shoulder attitude. A bit of the silent warrior type, but she knows about the Dragoons and their history, so she's giving insight throughout the game. What I do like is the initial setup for the game has a bit of a twist on the tried and true formula of the hero's tale. Our journey starts with Dart being on the lookout for the black monster that killed his parents, and he comes home to find that the small town that he's coming back to has been destroyed, and his childhood friend has been taken captive. So we do have the typical small town start for the JRPG young man, but the little twist is we don't get that initial calm, we just hit the ground running. The initial quest is to free Shauna, that childhood friend, but of course things expand out from there. Why does Dart have the power to become a Dragoon? They haven't been seen for over 10,000 years. What happened to his parents? Who's this robed man we see? What's the black monster? All of this will be answered in due time. Not here, I don't want to spoil it. But childhood me would be disappointed that I didn't get to the revelations that come after Disc 1. I can't iterate how much the ending of Disc 3 was like, what the freak is going on, in the best of ways. And I think that's the thing that sticks out to me the most. Looking back after seeing the credits of this game, and gestating on it for quite a while, I beat it last year, I find myself thinking about the revelations of the story rather than the character arcs on this journey. Which is funny because it's same thing with the childhood me. I've thought about what happens at the end of Disc 1 so many times. It's the story moments and revelations that stand out, or the big surprises. This band of characters, there's some standout moments with their dynamic, and some of the themes they explore are enhanced by some of the major plot points that get discovered, or things slow down a little bit, which Disc 2 does. It ends in a more smaller scale character moments without the crazy set pieces. I mean, there was stuff right before it, which was fun. So I like the dynamic of how they choose to leave me feeling after each major ending of Discs 1 through 3. A lot of time there's a turning point in most fantasy stories where the politics are left behind of the opposing countries that make up this fantasy world, and we either get very personal with a certain character's journey or we get very fantastical. I think this game does an adequate job of transitioning its main plot points while keeping in mind everything you've learned about the lands and politics still have some weight when we get to the crazy transition. Usually when I think of standout RPGs, it comes back to the characters, their history, or choices that somehow link them with the greater world or this greater plot that is going on. The Legend of Dragoon does that completely. Even if some of the story beats can be predictable in getting us there, I enjoyed the revelations for what they were, especially Disc 3 craziness. I did say it came back to the characters, but I feel like some of the characters could have gone through more of a journey. But that's a balancing act between plot, characters, and world building. But the biggest failing of this story is the characters just aren't as interesting as I think they could be. That could be down to some of the translation. A little too much of the characters feeling like cardboard cutouts at times. But again, the big reveals do have impact on the characters, and I feel like those were connected well. And for the most part, we do get characters' little side stories and why their motivation on why they're journeying with Dart and why they decided to leave everything behind to journey and find this black monster. The reveal is so good. Overall, it succeeded. It was enough for me to keep switching discs one after another. Also, it's hard to end anything, and I do really like the very last screen that you see in this game. It's nice. I've conquered the wants of my childhood. The Legend of Dragoon has been on my backlog for so long, and I am thrilled that I finally did it. I finally took it off the shelf and finished it all the way through. I've read many people's unbridled nostalgia for this game, and honestly I can see where they get it. In a sea of RPGs on the PS1 and coming off the SNES era, Legend of Dragoon still stands tall in its uniqueness. Some familiar settings with the twist, some stuff that I haven't seen in any other RPG. and you have a gamble of putting together a completely different battle system. And on top of that, you have some amazing twists and revelations in the story, and I can say with confidence there is something special about this game in the mythos that surrounds it. I did have some childhood nostalgia coming into this experience, but I can now see the whole entire picture after finishing the ending, and I can see what it is. In my eyes, this is a great concept bogged down by technology and design choices. A ginormous budget did not fix the issues with load times or with the slow pacing, and I think they probably spent so much money they wanted you to see all the crazy visuals of your attacks and your magic. There is a trade-off to the flair sometimes where the pacing, getting in and out of battle, is not a priority. A lot of these issues could be turned around with a modern remake or resources put into making a sequel to this cult classic of a game. And I'm here at my wrap-up. I haven't even talked about the music. I'm not a huge fan of the battle themes in this game, which is, what you're going to be doing a lot of, but there's some standouts for sure. Some of the cities you go to, or especially that opening theme, is spectacular. But it isn't one of my favorite OSTs that I've heard, but it really does fit the world of Legend of Dragoon, and that's exactly what you want to happen. So if we cleared up some of the blemishes on this crown that the Legend of Dragoon is wearing, could it actually be the king of the PS1 RPGs? No, I don't think so. But it would stand proudly out in the courtyard, like a statue protecting our fictional JRPG city, and all the townspeople would get to witness it as they made their way to the king's court, and they would have to stop and admire its design. And of course, they would never forget the sound that statue makes when you walk up to it. It will be with them forever. Just like it will be in my mind and heart, because The Legend of Dragoon for me was worth my time. I revived this game from my childhood. I don't know if I can say the same for you if it's worth yours, though. But I do hope to find others out there where The Legend of Dragoon has a special place in their hearts and minds, because outside of nostalgia, this game has found a special little place in my mind. Oh, and that statue out there in the courtyard would most certainly say, Volcano! We'd never be too far away. If you can think of another RPG that you think needs to be revived for me to tackle, well, let me know, because who doesn't have the burning rush to slay another game off the backlog? Or if you want me to take a nice deep dive look at the story of The Legend of Dragoon, and we can talk about all the spoilers of the crazy moments I've referenced in this episode. Let me know, because I will always do another episode on something that I find is worth your time.